Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. Ukraine War news update for the 15th of November 2023. It's good to have you here. It's always better when we're together. Just a bit of a Jack Johnson reference there. Right, let's go to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, and we have some fairly high very high figures in a couple of these categories. 820 personnel loss is still a pretty high number. We have seen consistent Russian losses in personnel over the last month. Even Zelensky was making comments about the losses in Avdiivka yesterday. So Avdiivka has been really painful for the Russians. Obviously there's going to be high Ukrainian losses too. 15 tanks and 18 APVs, armoured personnel vehicles. That will include infantry fighting vehicles, armoured personnel carriers, and mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles. Those sorts of bits of kit. 18 of them taken out in a day is heavy. 15 tanks is double what we saw yesterday with 8, I think it was yesterday. So that is a heavy day of losses for the Russians. And then get to 58 artillery systems. I don't know if that's the highest number we've seen. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong. I have to check out Dell's stats. Remember, Dell updates these figures and puts them on an Excel spreadsheet that is open source. You can see that in the link below. You can check out the trends that are taking place. I'm probably due another update to an analysis of those stats. 58 artillery pieces is absolutely phenomenal. 2 multiple launch rocket systems and 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems. That will be a bit of a loss for the Russians there, because as you can see, the average over the course of the war is less than 1 a day for anti-aircraft warfare systems. So to lose 2 in a day is obviously pretty good for the Ukrainians. 1 aircraft loss, that's a fixed-wing aircraft around Avdiivka, and that's being caught on camera. 26 drones and 1 cruise missile. That is not from last night, as far as I can work out. 47 vehicles and fuel tanks. The logistics are being absolutely hammered. That's a really bad day for the Russians, and 2 pieces of special equipment. So another really heavy day of Russian losses. If we look at Andrew Perpetua's stats here, there's the mapper that goes around looking at different sources to see what has been lost the day before. He has, I'm guessing, well, actually we can work it out on the actual original sources. So you've got 27 Russian losses and you've got 8. So that is about 2.5 Russian losses to every Ukrainian loss. What do we have here? We have a Tor M1 air defense system lost. We have an electronic warfare bit of kit, an engineering vehicle, and a boat. Those are kind of the odd bits and pieces. And then some artillery, a couple of tanks, a bunch of IFVs, a few APCs, and trucks and civilian vehicles. So that's your basic spectrum of kit there, but obviously some other interesting ones in terms of a boat, an air defense system, an engineering vehicle. Then for the Ukrainians, we have mainly artillery, 1 radar system, a P-18 radar, and then civilian bit of kit and a couple of unknowns. So nothing too high value for the Ukrainians. Obviously they're going to rue missing that artillery, but although the Russians only have 3 bits of artillery in Andrew Perpetua's list here, according to the general staff, there is another 55 to be counted. So 58 in total. One can take, as I keep saying, you can take 30% off that, and it's still an absolutely horrific number for the Russians. And we'll see if evidence of that comes out later. Now, Andrew Perpetua had a bit of a rant yesterday. He wasn't happy his live stream. He was like, why is this kind of stuff not getting reported in mainstream media? Of course, you get a normalization of what's going on, but he talks about, first of all, there's footage that was going viral of a Russian officer beating a Russian soldier with a stick, but actually he was more talking about the shelling taking place, particularly around Kherson, where a number of people have died, where civilian infrastructure has just been continually hit in what can only be described as war crimes. One particular example was a hospital in Kherson getting shelled and 2 people who were just waiting outside the hospital dying, and that looks like that was absolutely purposefully attacked. It was MLRS, the multiple launch rocket system, which has your your circle error probable, not really that, but your radius of where it's going to hit, or more of an oval of where it's going to hit. And that was, slap bang on the hospital. In fact, it's not the first time, well, not that hospital, there's another hospital in northern Kherson which has been routinely hit as a big old hospital, that we know, over the course of this war, that Russia has purposefully targeted hospitals, as they have done in Syria. So over 700 medical facilities have been hit. It's just absolutely terrible. And Syria, has suffered hugely itself from having hospitals and medical facilities purposefully targeted. And then there was a story yesterday of a car that was purposefully targeted. It was shelled as it was driving back from a hospital appointment, or on the way to, I can't remember. But anyway, you had a grandfather, a daughter, and then a baby of the adult daughter. Grandfather was killed. She's had to have her legs amputated and is unable to breathe without assistance. So she's in hospital. Basically, the pressure, I think, of the shell, what it does to you is I don't know whether it's punctured her lungs or whatnot. But anyway, she's in a really bad state. And the baby as well is heavily injured, shrapnel wounds, punctured lungs, kidney, I think, failure, and all sorts, just from what is apparently a purposeful strike on a car by artillery as it drives to medical appointment. It's just absolutely shocking. Then the library was here. I told you about that. Just absolutely shocking. As Andrew Perpetua says, these are all the things Elon Musk fully supports and embraces with his just negotiate. The last two brain cells he has left rolled a blunt and decided that this is what he wanted to support. And he's really not happy with the kind of rhetoric he's hearing from people like Elon Musk, and the fact that this is not talked about enough in the mainstream media. So it's up to people like us to communicate what the Russians are doing. And this isn't unusual. This is on a daily basis. They're doing stuff like this. They are hitting civilian infrastructure routinely and on purpose. And it is despicable and needs to stop. Russian Su-25 is destroyed near Avdiivka. This is caught on camera, and the end result of it, at least since the launch of the Russian offensive, 8 Russian Su-25s have been lost, according to Ukrainian field support. So Avdiivka has been a graveyard not only for mechanized equipment, ground equipment like your infantry fighting vehicles and tanks and whatnot, but also for fixed-wing aircraft. West of Avdiivka, near Vodyany, actually this is south of Avdiivka really, near Vodyany Severny, over 20 destroyed Russian armoured vehicles can be seen. Now, I reported on this yesterday, there's more video footage to support these claims. A good 20 vehicles lost in the Avdiivka graveyard as a result of the work of the 53rd Mechanized Brigade working in the area. But it has to be said, it's on a bit of a knife edge. Avdiivka, it's not looking great for the Ukrainians. The Russians seem to be able to afford monumental losses just to justify, I guess, those incremental gains. But those incremental gains all add up. President Zelensky, his address reveals that Russian forces face heavier losses in Avdiivka than before at Bakhmut, suggesting these losses could negatively impact Russia's strategic position in the war. So when we were seeing 1,000 troops a day being lost at the height of the Bakhmut activity, that was when much of the front line was had heavy fighting across it. And so that 1,000 was made up largely, yes, by Bakhmut, but also a lot of stuff going on elsewhere. Well, I think these heavy losses in Bakhmut these heavy losses that are being reported on a daily basis by the Ukrainian General Staff are largely underwritten by Avdiivka, and the claims are that is to a higher degree than Bakhmut. We are seeing this last week, particularly, some really heavy figures for Russian losses. Now, there's also heavy losses for the Russians around Klishchiivka. Russians tried to attack Ukrainian positions. Before they reached their intended position, they were destroyed by the defenders. of the 93rd Mechanized Brigade. 93rd is pretty famous. They were involved in the beginning of this war in 2014 around Avdiivka, actually around the airport there. Famous. I think they also, was it them that lost quite a few at Ilovaisk at the massacre there. But anyway, they're a well-respected regiment. They are doing a job up in Klishchivka. There are reports that in Klishchivka, the Ukrainians are on a back foot. The Russians had momentum around Bakhmut. They are, however, doing kind of what they've done before. So they've had a rotation of a unit because a unit was getting hammered in these meat assaults. So they've rotated them out, brought a new unit in, and then they're just continuing to do exactly the same thing, which is just meat assaults. And some people, apparently, according to Andrew Perpetua's live stream, he was contacted by someone fighting in Klishchivka that was saying that they are like zombie hordes again. It's just like, like Bakhmut, same kind of claims previously. They're just sending people basically to their deaths, and but it is hard. The Ukrainians are under the cosh. They're exhausted. These guys are saying this is a second. We volunteered on day 2 of the war, and we're still fighting. This is a second winter we're looking at heading into, and we're not sure that we can physically survive another winter. And it's not so much about the fighting, but it's about the cold of the winter, the pneumonia, the limbs and the appendages that you lose, the hands and fingers from trench foot, from frostbite, from all of these things. It's not easy, and it's going to be another tough winter for both sides. Right, another arson at a military registration and enlistment office. This is happening on a nightly basis at the moment. This is in Kabardino-Balkaria, Caucasian south of Russia. Molotov cocktail made it through the window on the first floor of the building and did start a fire, but the man was quickly arrested. So, yeah, lots of enlistment officers being hit. As for distant strikes, not too much to report. Just trying to see if anything else has come out, but I can't see anything, even from the last sort of half hour. Looks like there's been a KH-59 cruise attack missile on Kryvyi Rih, but I haven't heard anything else about that. That was yesterday. Reports from an explosion outside the city. Air defense has, however, hit a couple of drones. So whether it's cruise missile, whether it's drones, don't really know. But one thing that has been noted is, again, another civilian strike last night. Russia launched a missile attack on the town of Seldove on the Donetsk region. As a result, the entrance of a 4-story residential building was destroyed. One person died. At least one person remains under the rubble. Again, arguably just a war crime. The Russians it's just terrible. It's really terrible. And what really pisses me off is that I'm getting really angry about like what's happening in the House of Representatives in the US. And again, they're holding it up, and they're apparently going to hold it up until after Thanksgiving. They've done an emergency, let's not make the government shut down, so we need to release funding, but they didn't release Ukraine funding. So, and it's just so frustrating because, this war needs to come to a close, and the only way it comes to a close in the best possible way is if the West, if the allied nations help Ukraine as much as possible and as effectively and efficiently as possible. On the other hand, there were explosions in Tokmak, which is not unusual. That gets hit routinely. So the Ukrainians still sending their missiles, but didn't hear too much about Ukrainian strikes last night, I have to be honest. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. Not too much to discuss here. Other than reference again to people not being, well, okay, what does Trent Talansko say? So this is about Wagner. Quote, became the disciplinarians and blocking forces necessary to enforce meat assaults is why you're seeing Wagner return on the Dnipro River line. Okay, so this is a claim that you have blocking troops behind the zero line, the contact line, so that if the Russian troops retreat without permission, they are shot. Who by? Well, it looks like this is what Wagner are doing again, as they are appearing on the front line in different places here along the Dnipro River. This is Osint Yuri reporting. Wagnerites were filmed disciplining Mobiks in the occupied left bank of Kherson. Wagner soldiers were spotted in a video showing several Russian soldiers being disciplined for taking drugs during combat. So I don't know if you remember, but Wagner were actually they had a list of rules that Prigozhin and his number two were very strong on. They had these rules between each other as to what they would be responsible for. But the Wagner itself had very strict rules for their soldiers throughout the units in terms of drugs and alcohol, and that was adhered to, as far as I understand, fairly strictly. So contrary to their reputation as uber warriors, the successes Wagner takes credit for in Bakhmut actually came on the backs of Russian Bars and Storm Z units, convicts and reservist Mobiks, who lost up to 50,000 fighters in a 10-month period conducting meat assaults. Yeah, so actually the better trained Wagnerites didn't do most of the assaulting. They did some of the crack stuff that was successful in Bakhmut, but loads of the waves, though they might have been under control of Wagner, were actually these penal groups that were sent to Bakhmut. Wagner controlled them, sent them in to do wave after wave, slowly grind away at the Ukrainians and end up taking territory. It's been clear to me, says Osint Uri, that during the battle for Bakhmut, Wagner, which was initially assigned the role of training the Mobiks, quickly became the disciplinarians and blocking forces necessary to enforce meat assaults. This video tells me that Russian MOD, understanding the value of this unique talent, has employed Wagner again in an attempt to repeat the miracle of Bakhmut across the entirety of the Russian line of contact. So whether they are definitely blocking units in Dnipro, I don't know. That is a bit of speculation here from Osint Yuri, but they are meting out discipline to units across the front line. Now, there was well, I suppose I'll show you the video first. So this is a video that was doing the rounds yesterday. It's quite interesting. It's of a Russian plane releasing the FAB 500 fixed-wing glide bombs that we hear so much about. I'm going to turn the sound off there. That we hear so much about, and you can see it drop, and the fins are out, and then it glides with a bit of GPS or GLONASS or whatever they use, tracking to get to the target, which is usually about 50 kilometers away. In fact, what we can tell, because that's geolocatable due to all the landmarks you can see below, that has been geolocated to 50 kilometers behind the front line. It drops a gliding bomb from Blahodatny in Kherson. If the geolocation below is accurate, it represents about a 50 kilometer distance from the front lines. But the problem here is that Ukraine has nothing it can pull to the front lines to shoot down the Su-34 at the moment. That's a serious problem, unfortunately. Up to 100 of these bombs can be dropped per day. This is a huge issue, and they don't have the air defenses that can knock them out. I mean, they would have to bring incredibly high value air defenses right close to the contact line here, and that would obviously leave those very expensive bits of kit being very vulnerable to artillery, to drone strikes and whatnot. So yeah, it's a choice they haven't made yet, but I've said previously I would just love them to bring a Patriot system, whack it in the front line for a day, then take it up to maybe near Robotna for a day, and just take out a whole bunch of stuff, which is kind of what they did by all accounts up in the north. You remember when was it the Bryansk region or the Belgorod region of Russia, where the Russians lost like 6 aircraft in one day, certainly 5, and there was all these rumors going about like how they were shot down, and the prevailing rumor at the time, or explanation at the time, was that they were shot down by Russians' air defense systems accidentally. But then it's come out subsequently that it appears that a Patriot system was placed up in the north just temporarily, and I like that idea. Get a high value Patriot system with a long range, with the right kind of missiles on board, and then Robert's your mother's brother. You shoot down a bunch of very annoying fixed-wing aircraft. Anyway, Max 23 reports here: Russians use chemical weapons on the hottest areas of the front, according to Deep State. 2 cases of the use of chemical weapons are recorded on the Svatova and Bakhmut directions. Most likely the enemy use chlorpyrifrin, which is in large quantities in stock. There are these claims, and in fact the Russians have thrown out those claims to the Ukrainians. The Russians often do that, it seems, and this is again a bit of speculation from myself, but they often try and do a bit of projection. So they claim that Ukraine are doing things when it's them that are doing it themselves. And I know that might seem like a bit of an excuse to try and get out of Ukraine possibly using these things, but Ukraine know that everything's going to be recorded, that they are under a great deal of microscopic analysis from the international community, so they need to make sure they are doing everything by the book. I doubt they'll be freely using chemical weapons. However, the Russians, I don't think, give a damn. So likelihood is that the Russians have used it and then accuse the Ukrainians of using it. Anyway, those are some of the rumors going around at the moment. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Take care. I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.